Okay, great.
Welcome, everybody. Nice, welcome. I let folks connect to their audio. Glad you're here. Welcome, letting people come in. And I'm gonna share my screen to give you a little visual here. Nice. Well, hello. I'm Rebecca. I'm the communications person here at Round Sky, and I will be hosting this conversation with Resource Generation and Round Sky and all of you attending today. So thanks for being here, and you're in the right Zoom if you're here to listen in on the work that Resource Generation has put into putting their values into practice. Particularly, they'll be sharing their learnings, lessons, highlights from jumping into this work with us at Round Sky. So many of us are on Zoom these days, but I want to touch on some logistics about this webinar before we get too far. So first, this session is being recorded and will be shared with all of you along with others that have registered in both Round Skies and RG's communities, RG's Resource Generation. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. We may not get to them right away, but we will kind of field them and have some time at the end for Q&A and get to as many as we can. And I also encourage you to use the chat box as it's helpful to connect with others and with us. And if the chat box is too distracting for you, you can just put it aside. Nothing crucial will be in there if that doesn't work for you. And if you have not used this, I'll just put a quick hello in the chat, or maybe somebody will, so it pops up. I'll do that in a second. But if you have any technical issues, you can chat Daniel directly, which you can see his name is Daniel, he, him, Round Sky Solutions, and he will do his best to support you. And please, we all know this, but please stay on mute as much as you can for the webinar so we can hear everybody. Our speakers are really good at picking up all the sounds. And we will be holding this conversation for about an hour and a half. And you may leave with questions. That's good. We'll put you in some potential directions to continue the conversation with both us at Round Sky and also Resource Generation. So with that, I want to orient you. Lots of you are new to us and want to let you know a little bit about who we are. So I'll just share two quick things about Round Sky as we get started. So Round Sky is a worker-owned cooperative, meaning we're a business where the workers who own the business, who work there also own the business together, and we focus on cooperative management and leadership development. We believe that there are two main training opportunities when developing leadership and facilitation, which combining the two is somewhat unique to us, and in my sense. First is the tools and processes that we teach, which we call CoLab, which you'll hear a little bit about today. And even if those tools are perfect, I'm not saying they are, but if they were, we still need number two, which is personal development, to build self-awareness and emotional intelligence into our facilitation and to continuously evolve together. So in addition to those pieces, you'll hear from RG about how their political analysis can also help shape the team's management and leadership and how that has been super crucial. And that leads me to the second piece I want to tell you. We approach our work through customized trainings like the one you'll hear Resource Generation folks talk about today, and it can be a really meaningful way to make concrete change and shifts to live out your collaborative leadership and participatory values. So we also have courses that you can explore as well. If what we're offering if what we're sharing today resonates with you, please reach out to us and you'll get a link to learn about that more. With that, I'd like to invite Ime and Yaya to talk a bit about Resource Generation and their work and mission.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ime. I am the Executive Director of Resource Generation. And Resource Generation, we organize young people with wealth and class privilege in the United States to become transformative leaders, working towards the equitable distribution of wealth, land, and power. We are a national multiracial membership community of 18 and 35-year-olds who are in the top 10% of the economy. And we have over 1,200 members in 18 chapters around the country. Our key strategies are base building, leadership development, running issue-based campaigns with our national partners, and redistribution campaigns, and mobilizing our resources for social justice.
Nice. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing. You'll hear a lot more about that today. And I wanted to invite you all to introduce yourselves. And we'd love to hear your name, pronouns, where you're calling from, and what you're looking forward to today in the chat box. And so you see the prompt here. And while you do that, we'll each share about ourselves as well. And I'll start. So I'm Rebecca. My pronouns are she, her. I live in New Orleans, originally known as Bulbancha to the indigenous people of this land, which include the Chitimacha peoples. And I'm the communications lead here and worker owner at Round Sky. And I've been working with Round Sky for about 5 years, next month. And what drew me to this work was wanting to work in a cooperative and be more involved in the co-op movement, and a general dissatisfaction with the lack of meaningful collaboration that I was experiencing at the nonprofit that I used to work at. So this conversation feels pretty close to my own heart. And I really like how Cecile, my coworker, has put it, that there was a lot of quote, collaboration washing going on. My boss said we were collaborative, and I think he truly meant that he wanted that, but essentially it was all talk. And coming from, and also in addition to that, I'm really excited to talk a little bit more about power in the workplace and the work that we're doing. So I will pass it to Ime to talk a bit about themselves.
Yeah, so again, my name is Ime. I use they, them pronouns. I live in DC, which is occupied Piscataway land. I'm the executive director of Resource Generation. Because our work is grounded around organizing young people with wealth and class privilege and towards ending classism and racial capitalism, we use storytelling about our class backgrounds as one of our primary tools. So just want to share a little bit about that I come from an upper class background. My parents are wealthy Chinese immigrants. And yeah, I think I come to RG from being a member of RG and being drawn to be accountable around my own access to class privilege. And what I'm really excited about in terms of this webinar is really thinking about how we turn our values and principles around collaboration, democratic governance, and anti-oppression into concrete practices and tools that we can use every day. And I'm excited to share more about what that looks like for us.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here this morning. My name is Yaya. I like they, them pronouns. I've been at Resource Generation for 6 years. I'm currently our campaign director. I come from a mixed class background. I'm owning class on my dad's side, who owns and operates plastic factories in Morocco, but was raised here in the United States with my white American mom in a poor to lower middle class home. And yeah, I'm super excited to be on this webinar in particular. I'm a long time governance nerd. And so this journey with CoLab has been special for me, and have personally a journey from consensus decision making. I've done the Sociocracy for All training, and then I've gone through the CoLab training. And I'm always excited about experiments in participatory democracy. And yeah, and for us as a nonprofit, I think really trying to put our values into praxis and realizing the world that we're fighting for right now at a tiny scale in our workplace.
Well, my name is Dolores Butler, and I'm in, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. And I just finished one of the co-ops with Round Sky, and I encourage all of you all to be a part of this. It's a great and powerful program. I always want to increase my knowledge and skills. So that's why I'm here today, to get more of leadership skills, governance, and going on in my organization as a whole. You know, we all need this in the practices of developing a stronger and better organization to go forward. Thank you.
Hi, Dolores. Thanks for being
Hi,
here. It's nice
Rebecca.
to
I'm so
see
glad
you.
to be here.
I'm glad you said hello and introduced yourself,
Yeah,
and
yes.
glad that you're here. And I'll pass it to Cecile to introduce yourself as well. And you're muted.
Thanks, everyone. It's fantastic to meet you all, and fun to read the introductions in the chat box too. And I'm one of the co-founders of Round Sky Solutions. I use she, her pronouns, and I live near Montpelier, Vermont, which is on Abenaki land. I've been a social entrepreneur for over 30 years now, and I have experienced a lot of different environments, of mission-driven people with good intentions, and was inspired to really support mission-driven organizations to live out their values more effectively by mastering decentralized or shared leadership. And so I took a deep dive into organizational and individual development in search of an answer. And in particular, I was really curious about what power is and how I'm really aware of how awareness of power dynamics is critical to effective decentralized leadership. And so I developed some theories about power to map or explain the dynamics I commonly saw in organizations, and synthesize this research into a set of processes that we call CoLab that reliably help us deliver healthy forms of power in action. And I published a book, Collaboration That Works, a ruthlessly practical handbook for a generative world, as a training manual that summarizes this research. I had the pleasure of being the main trainer for RG's implementation of CoLab, and am excited to be sharing the work we've done together over the past 15 months with you all to support your journey in living your values through shared leadership and power in your organization. And off to you, Daniel.
Yes, hi, thanks everyone. So good to be here with you. My name's Daniel Little, he, him pronouns. I am also a co-founder of Round Sky with Cecile. And my specialty really is as a coach. I love seeing the kind of the personal transformation and learning journey. And I was involved with the training with RG a little bit, primarily around the topics around personal development and the aspects of like how do we support each other in in our individual kind of growth in a process to becoming more capable shared leadership practitioners. And yeah, and today I'm really just going to be playing a technical role behind the scenes, helping out with chat and stuff. So text me if you're having difficulties, or if you have questions, and I'll be trying to save those for later when we can get to them, things like that. Thank you.
Nice. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, everybody, for introducing yourselves. I see so many great comments in the chat box. I'm almost overwhelmed with how many comments there are because I can't read them all. And but just thank you for being here. And I'm excited to talk about governance, and also excited to talk about institutionalizing participatory leadership. I'm reading a few as I go here. And putting values into action, new models of leadership and governance, approaching collaboration, dig into strategies around accountability and interpersonal accountability, or around collaboration and interpersonal accountability. Great. And as questions come up, please do ask them. And with that, let's continue on here. I'd love to hear a little bit more about RG. I know that when I also, just kind of an orientation, when I talk about RG, I mean resource generation. I'll be using those kind of interchangeably, and chat me if that is particularly confusing, and I will not do that. I'll try not to. So my understanding is that as RG does a lot to combat classism and racism and the intersecting oppressions that show up. And RG strikes me as a nonprofit that is operating as much as possible outside of the nonprofit industrial complex. And that feels unique to me. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about RG and anything you want to share about the history or kind of like how you've gotten to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. I can start. So Resource Generation, we were founded in 1998. And we were founded by a cross-class group of people, including white folks who were going to be inheriting money and were looking for progressive donor communities, but found that the existing ones were mostly people who were older. And so our founders were in their 20s and really interested in meeting other young people who had progressive values, who had access to wealth, but there wasn't kind of a network or a space for that. And so they were actually partnering with several existing social justice foundations at the time, including Haymarket, Third Wave Fund. These are, excuse me, BIPOC-led public foundations that often were doing activist-led grassroots grant making. They were raising all the money that they were granting, and they were these institutions were already on the forefront of really thinking about how do we redistribute wealth to BIPOC grassroots community organizing. And so RG was really founded in this context of both this peer relationship, people really wanting to build with each other, a youth organization, and also was really influenced by people from across all class backgrounds who had this vision around social justice and the role that wealthy people could play in it. And yeah, and since then, so we started as more of a donor network, people meeting each other at national conferences, in potlucks and dinners in their regions, really like focused on feminist practices from the beginning of relationship building and personal storytelling. And this idea that if we're able to connect with each other, be transparent and accountable around class backgrounds, and see models for how we can show up in social justice movements fully as people with access to wealth, that's one of the ways that we can create change and be in solidarity with poor and working class people. And I think that was really sort of the first 10 years or so, 10 years of our journey as an organization. We were fiscally sponsored, actually, by Third Sector New England at the time. So we actually didn't become our own independent 501c3 until 2015. But yeah, there was a lot of experiments from people who were running like donor or giving circles. There was partnerships with social justice foundations. And there was also a push as we were thinking more about what is our broader role in social justice movements to actually change our mission and look at our theory of change back in 2012. And so there was actually a 2-year process where our original mission was around organizing young people with wealth to leverage their privilege for social change. And now through that process, really articulating a much more radical vision around the equitable distribution of wealth, land, and power, and seeing ourselves as part of organizing a membership base. And so kind of we did make this transition from thinking about like individual donors to we actually have members, like dues paying members who we consider as a base of people that we're organizing around common goals. And I'll pass to Yaya to talk more about that side of our work.
Totally. To build on that, I think like in terms of this question of like what makes us unique, where sometimes when we're at our like in-person retreats, we can draw some Venn diagrams that there's this like world of philanthropy, there's this world of like grassroots movements, and where they overlap is the world of social justice philanthropy, which we have, like many like partners and allied organizations. And then within that ecosystem, we are one of the only groups that is actively doing grassroots organizing and base building of people with access to wealth and class privilege. And I think, over the time that I've been at RG, I mean, since 2013, I think we've been in this, to use CoLab language, in this generative tension of doing organizing with a privileged base and striving to build relational people power with a group of people who already has disproportionate structural power and access to money and access to decision makers. And I think in that moving through like the challenge of like identifying like our personal stake in the world that we want, that I think wealth can insulate and buffer us from, yeah, I think like so much of, yeah, like the worst of the violence of racial capitalism. And so I think it takes like a little bit of a different angle and a little bit more work to really tap into, yeah, like what is my personal stake in healthcare for all? What is my personal stake in a world without prisons? And so, yeah, over the past, I think like 5 years specifically, we have, yeah, developed our work around campaigns. We had, yeah, a multi-year process to identify national campaign partnerships, which we now have with the Movement for Black Lives and the Center for Popular Democracy, that we definitely believe that a silo, an organization of privileged people is not going to change the world in the ways that, yeah, that we want by ourselves. And so that we need to be in relationship, and I think following the leadership of, yeah, other organizations that are led by people most directly impacted. And we found that, and we found those allies in the Movement for Black Lives and the Centers for Popular Democracy and their affiliate members. And so, yeah, so we've been doing the work of living out like what do campaigns actually look like at the national level? What does building out campaign partnerships and relationships look like at the chapter level? And parallel and simultaneous to that, we've also been increasing our rigor around redistribution. I think it was about 3 years ago, we introduced our giving guidelines, which ask people with access to wealth to redistribute all or almost all of unearned wealth and resource into movements for social change. And alongside that, we now have a redistribution pledge that we ask members of our community to sign. And yeah, I think last year we had pledges for over $65 million to movements for racial and economic justice. And this year our goal is 100 million, and we're still working on that. And then, of course, alongside, you know, the campaigns and the redistribution, we've also been doing a lot of work around building our base. And I think, you know, from the time we launched our membership program, we probably had 150 members, and that was in, yeah, 2011, 2012. And now we have over 1,200 members. And so I think really remarkable growth of this community over the last 10 years.
That is incredible. And just like the growth of it. And Ime, when you mentioned that RG started in 1998, that just feels like, wow, that's an incredible amount of time. I know there's organizations that have been working much longer than that, but working on redistribution, and I know that's evolved over time, but that is pretty incredible, and just kind of, I think in some ways speaks to this is kind of like a lifelong in lots of ways. Like doing this work is lifelong, and very, very core to values and to like reimagining and building. So thank you for sharing about that, and building relationships. Seems like that's been really core to your work also, is what really stood out to me. And this also really connects to, I was looking through some of the evaluations that we did with RG, especially in the beginning. And there was one question around, what do you most want to see resource generation achieve to the staff? And I put it on a slide because I just feel like it's so beautiful. So I'll share that with you all, and I'll also read it out. So for those that are listening in. So one of the resource generation staff members said that they most want to see the organization be able to be a cohesive team that can work across teams with respect for each other's work, and be able to all feel proud that we are part of an organization's work to move towards redistribution of wealth, land, and power. And then there was another comment that said, while still holding a culture of care. So there's this there's the both the internal and the external are so intertwined and key. And that really spoke to me and what I see in the work that you're doing. And so that really leads me to this next question of, can you tell us a little bit more about what you were experiencing, what patterns you were seeing, and just the why that you were seeking out these resources for collaboration and sharing power together.
Sure. Yeah, I could start. Yeah, so I think, as you reflected, relationship building, trust, collaboration were really important to us as an organization, and how it's very much embedded in our culture. And we were starting to really struggle with the limits of having a very relationship-based, trust-based, collaborative, consensus-based culture with a more traditional nonprofit hierarchical structure. And that brought up a lot of challenges around people who were most impacted by decisions, not being there to shape the decisions from the beginning, or putting a lot of responsibility on what we originally called the strategy team, which is basically the team of all the director level positions in the organization, which are charged with holding strategy and governance and alignment. But it put a lot of weight on the individual directors on that team to really think about, oh, how do I get the input of everyone else on my team, balance all of that, come up with a proposal, come back to them, and it sort of individualized that responsibility of, we want a lot of collaboration, but we don't have a shared tool for it. And so it actually created a lot of bottlenecking, would slow us down or would push decisions upward that actually were better solved through the group or through and it disempowered people who maybe didn't have management roles or the director level title, but were being really affected by those decisions. And so that was just constantly coming up for us. People were sharing in our staff retreats or in like regular meetings of just this ongoing like feeling like we're not like living into our potential, or there's a lot of inefficiency, or it's hard to make big decisions together. And so we were experimenting a lot with, okay, how do we try to address this? We create like cross-team committees on certain projects. We did collaborative budgeting as a full team, and put a lot of time into making sure everyone understood all like the budget itself, and multiple rounds of process around how do we make a decision as a full staff around it. But these are sort of one-off attempts, and although we learned a lot from those kinds of experiments, it was siloed, and it wasn't the entire like organizational governance change that I think was really needed. And the last thing I would say that kind of led us to wanting to have additional resources around collaboration and sharing power is that there was a dynamic where, of course, supervisors, management, director level roles had explicit power in the organization, but we also did have a pattern around that there were people on the team who just had implicit power based on their relationships with folks, or just tenure in the organization. And we didn't have a really good way of being transparent or accountable to that, and that would also create tensions and conflict. And I'll pass to Yaya.
Really. So before CoLab, I've been a director since we implemented CoLab, but my experience before CoLab was as a regional organizer, so kind of the lowest rung of our hierarchy at the time. And I think my experience it really mirrors what Ime was sharing, that really experienced like a slow turnaround and bottlenecking of the I think like urgent and pressing decisions that were affecting the on the ground organizing, getting stuck in the strategy team, sometimes not agreeing or thinking that what the strategy team choices like were they actually the most strategic for the work on the ground. And then I think like while we had like values of like consensus or like having like full team buy-in, I think that we had like inconsistent processes for actually making decisions that I think oftentimes it felt like was left up to the discretion of the person who was moving the project or was like owning the project, and sometimes that was like a more collaborative and a more consensus driven approach, and sometimes it was more of like a top-down or directive approach, and so it felt unclear when like which decisions do we make collaboratively, which ones do we not. And then like as somebody who like I think you may talking about soft power, like I definitely somebody who knew that I had soft power and was choosing to use it a lot. Like I think I have like a close relationship with Ime. I've had close relationships with our associate directors, and yeah, even though I was just an organizer, felt very comfortable like shooting an email being like, hey, what do you think about this policy? I really think we should do this. Like, can we? And following up if I didn't get a response. And I know that, yeah, some of my coworkers didn't feel like comfortable doing that. And so sometimes I was taking on that role on behalf of coworkers who didn't feel as comfortable speaking out or sharing their thoughts. And sometimes I was just pushing my own agenda, like within the organization. And while I think for the most part, I support the things I was advocating for, it definitely wasn't like a democratic or equitable way that everybody had access to.
So I saw some nods as you all were speaking, and also just total, like, these things are so common, like these challenges around decision making and using what you call soft power. I mean, that's kind of the way that the world is created if you don't have the explicit power. And also it's a real gift in some ways to have that and to be able to advocate, and also not like the most equitable way to continue. Right? It works for right now. And sometimes I think organizations at some point see it and want to evolve that, which is what you all have seen. And so thank you for sharing that. And if I want to just kind of underscore some of the things that the RG staff also mentioned in the intake evaluation, the first one. And I'll share my screen. There's a lot of words just to prepare you all. But these were some of the key themes that I saw. And here it is. So one was really about making decisions, and that kind of, someone said that they felt like they had a lack of empowerment to make decisions and like move the team forward. And that to me really says that like there wasn't a process to do that, and maybe they felt uncomfortable using that soft power possibly. And the other folks said that there's a lot of brilliant people on this team, but much of their power is implicit and through their influence. And I'd like to harness everyone's collective power, was what they said. And to this next point around challenges with decision making, on the slide, you'll see it says there's a lot of soft buy-in happening without clear delineations, which inevitably steps on toes despite best responses. So it's unclear if the staff is giving input or if they have decision-making power, like what was being asked of them, or how far would that go? And another person said, related to decision-making, that there's a culture of deep consensus and commitment to anti-oppression in ways that are really important, and also can slow down decision-making to the point of ineffectiveness or organizational harm. So I think that's also what I was hearing as well, the bottlenecking piece. And that roles were unclear, that there wasn't a clear understanding to who's responsible for what. And RG grew so much over the last 10 years. So it makes sense that it got a bit convoluted, and that there was some growing pain there. So we found that sometimes folks and organizations that get to this point where they're seeing these patterns, they see the challenges that they're having with decision making and role clarity, and then they find they have a conversation with me personally, and then they take it back to their team, but they get stuck because there's no process or there's no alignment to decide to do it. So I'm curious, what was it like for you to decide to do this work? Can you share a little bit about your process?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned, there's a pretty consistent feedback from the team over multiple years around these themes. Yeah, the unclear decision-making process, roles being unclear. How do we harness everyone's collective power instead of using the implicit and soft power? And I think as we were growing from a staff size of when I joined to 10 to 12 to 15 to now 20, we'll probably be closer to like 23 or 25. By next year, yeah, we were really just starting to reach the edges of what our current structure could really provide and support us with. And so I think it really back in 2019, actually, I'll back it up a little bit. I actually had met Brown Sky. I think Rebecca, we were at the NEC Common Bound conference together, and I think you might have come to RG's workshop. And so plug to going to conferences and building relationships, because then I was on your listserv. And I got the Round Sky like listserv announcement about your CoLab certification level 1 training. And I think, we have been going through all these experiments with trying to address these issues and have more shared decision making. And we're starting to kind of just hit this, like, we're like, okay, some of this works, but it's really just not addressing the root problem. And yeah, it feels very one-off, it's not sustained. And then I saw that email, and I think there was probably some language in there around, are you getting frustrated with your efforts around collaboration and you just want a set of best practices? And I was like, yes, please, just somebody tell me, someone else who's just focused on this and has like years of experience and actually has a model for this. Yeah, I did feel like I was like, I'm probably reinventing the wheel. I'm probably trying things I've been trying before. It'd be really amazing to actually just have a set of curriculum or a holistic system. And so, so I think it was a combination of like, yeah, we were just experiencing a lot of challenges, and we were looking for a solution, and then like through the relationship and knowing about y'all. And I think it also was really important that like pretty much all the senior leaders on the team also felt this pain and were in alignment that we really need to do something about this. That's like more like, that's a bigger intervention that we've been trying. And actually really remember one of my former coworkers, Sarah Abbott, who was the director in the organization at the time, she saw, I sent the CoLab level 1 email around. I was like, I don't have enough time to do the spring training. Can one of y'all do it? And she actually wrote back, I was like, I really think you should prioritize this. Like, this is an essential need for our organization. Like, I really like think you should do this. And so I think that just also speaks to like other leaders or other advocates in the organization who have a perspective on our challenges, saying like this needs to be prioritized. And so that helped. That was a nudge to sign up for the fall 2019 level 1 training. And I also asked 2 other senior leaders, Faisal, our associate director, and Caitlin, our campaign director, our organizing director, she was formerly a campaign director, who were the heads of the 2 other largest teams in the organization, to join the level 1 training. So I also think that that alignment building and that like shared understanding amongst senior staff was pretty critical. And yeah, that's Yaya.
Yeah, I think like Ime spoke to, I think like the behind the scenes. I wasn't a part of the strategy team, wasn't a part of those conversations. But I think definitely was one of the staff members who I think like for a long time was, I think like really asking for some more clarity like around our decision making. I think coming out of a staff retreat, I was like part of like I think a team that was trying to answer this question, but like I think didn't feel like we had the tools it felt like a big overwhelming project to figure out like how do we create a system, and was kind of like recreating the wheel, right, of trying to figure something out like for our team. And I think that project kind of like petered out, and then I think was brought back to life when like when a number of our directors did the certification. Like I will say, like in terms of rollout, I think like the first time as a staff person I was introduced to CoLab, we were trying to pass our end of year budget using the process, and I think that that decision and that meeting got like a bit messy, and so I think I think we're going to be getting to advice like in the next bit, but I think trying out like a totally new process with like a lot of new cultures and like practices of I think maybe not doing like a huge like and urgent decision. I think that was one of the things that felt stressful, was like we had to pass the budget by the end of the year, and we were also trying to practice democracy and like participation like in a new way, I think I've got more thoughts on the like what some of the like initial like startup challenges were, but maybe I'll speak to that in a subsequent question.
Yeah, thanks. And I don't remember who said it to me, but there was this advice about like start with an easy win. Don't use like such a crucial conversation for the first time you try out a new process for your team. Because it can be so hard, and like learning it is one piece, and then all budget itself, like so much can come out of that around class background and race and just all the different pieces that are a part of that. I'm sure you didn't say that, but I know from my own budget conversations that there are all these other pieces that come out when we're talking about it. And what I really loved about hearing your process, you didn't say this, so I'll share, is that before you, so Ime and a few others took the level 1 course with us and then decided that they wanted to bring this to their team afterward. And you took your team through a collective process to decide it, which probably feels obvious to a lot of people on this call, but I don't think it is, because so many organizations will just take this to their team and say, we're going to do this. And there's not collective buy-in, there's not collective consent around this huge process that will change the way you do things, so that you're more collaborative and open up pieces that will in the long run be really useful. So I think getting that collective consent, when I heard that, I was like, oh, I want to hear how this goes. I wish I could have been like a little fly on the wall in your process, but that was one piece that really stuck out to me that is connected to your culture of consensus as well, that was mentioned. So I know it's hard to summarize over a year of training, and especially a pandemic year of training, so longer. And that a lot of the work you did is so interrelated with all the other pieces of your work. But I'm curious, what are some of the most significant shifts you've noticed in this work? What are you most excited about? And I'm going to ask Cecile to go first as the trainer of this, to share kind of what she saw about some of the shifts, and then hear from Ime and Yaya afterward.
Yeah, beautiful. So from my perspective as a trainer, over the 15 months that we've been working together so far, some of the biggest shifts were the benefits of standardizing a collaborative meeting practice in all the teams, which enabled more participation, increased visibility, and the increased ability to get through more items without losing the collective participation. And this also meant that, if you were in multiple teams, you could expect the same structure for all of your, meeting processes, and that enabled people to be more agile, basically. Also clarifying where collective decision-making was helpful, and also distributing the power to individuals holding various team-specific roles, roles created by the team to make decisions that didn't have to be discussed as a whole group. And that just enabled the team to focus more on the things that really needed that collective input, really would benefit from that, and enabled more autonomous power, which also brings more empowerment with it. So you kind of get 2 wins on that front. Also, integrating regular reporting in team meetings relieved some of the bottleneck for supervisors and helped to build more team transparency and cohesion. So that the team practice, the meeting practice, really helped bring the whole team together, as opposed to having all that information just go through a supervisor. And embedding personal development as an ongoing practice in the organization began to build a more distributed form of performance management, which was separate from direct supervision. So building in the muscles for collaborative performance management was also a big shift, and it's still underway. Many of these are still underway, but those are some of the biggest parts that stood out for me as your trainer.
Yeah, I think Cecile summed it up beautifully. I think from my perspective, really just all huge gains in just governance, just sort of the day-to-day decision-making process, who can decide what, when, clarity around roles and the responsibilities that come with those roles. And then we actually significantly restructured our team. We went from the 13-person organizing team meeting weekly as a 13-person team to breaking up that team into like sub teams, or CoLab calls it scopes of work around core strategies. And I think that really helped distribute a lot more power and responsibility to, the chapter organizers have their own team that's really just focused on the needs and the strategy of chapter organizing instead of trying to compete for airtime in a big group meeting. And so, and it's really helped us when we've had to come up with like short-term scopes of work to just have a model in which we're really clarifying like what is the purpose of this scope of work, what are the outcomes we're hoping for, who are the roles in this, and actually also having a more democratic process of electing people into those roles instead of, again, one place where soft power dynamics show up a lot is that we had a culture where there's a lot of like people wanting to, if they have more capacity, wanting to throw down for the team. I think there's definitely a sense of like we want to all help each other out, but then there were definitely patterns around who volunteers for what or who gets chosen to do which roles, and also having some shared model for how do we elect people into roles and what's the criteria for that, and we consent to that was actually really helpful and interesting. So those dynamics. Anything, Yaya?
Yeah, I think just like things that I would like underline from y'all's reflections is, we're super clear now on like who makes what decisions as an individual, like what decisions need to come to like a full team, who's going to be a part of that team. And I think there's just like a lot more like clarity and like nimbleness of being able to like introduce proposals and like new ideas like for the organization. And I think that there's, I think just like really want to underscore like having like a standard practice. Like, I think definitely there was like a learning curve at the beginning, getting used to the standard meeting practice. But now it's just like a super like reliable like template for our meetings. And like even I think like in our one-to-ones and our non-scope meetings, I think just like having it as like a default to fall back on, that's like, okay, like what are the key tensions, or what are the key like agenda, like is this, are we trying to be generative? Are we trying to actually like make a decision and move something through integrative consent? I think just having common practice and culture, I think has been really powerful for us.
Nice, thanks. And I'm sure like having the same meeting practice for each scope allows people to kind of move in and out as they're wearing different hats and as they get elected into new roles. I mean, this work, nonprofit work, but also like anti-oppression nonprofit work and co-op work involves many hats. Like we're not just kind of in our cubicle doing one thing. Like we have many hats that we're moving around, and it's helpful to be able to understand what's going on. No matter like what space you're in, there's that kind of learning is helpful. So I want to share some of the closing assessment data that we collected. I think for the people who are numbers people in here, this might be particularly interesting. And it kind of just underscores what you've all just said. But I'll start with this, one of the quotes that really felt like it summed up, and we did this last month. So this is hot information here. So one of the reflections from that closing assessment is said, CoLab has helped us restructure our team, clarify and visibilize roles and responsibilities, and set up a highly functional cross-scope executive team and move important decisions in inclusive ways. So this kind of just speaks to the governance piece that that folks felt over the last year and a half-ish. And so to get to the numbers, so these, hopefully you can see this. These were the statements that showed the greatest increase in scores from March 2020 to May 2021. And you'll see that most of these are governance and strategy. So one RG staff member had said that they felt like clear decision-making is the most helpful shift, both collective and that people know when they're make their decisions over their work, which ones are collective, which ones are individual. And so you can see before the averages were all under 4. So here the 4 out of 5, a score of 5, right? 5 is right here. 4. So this blue is what the initial score was. So you can see the numbers 2.73, 2.91, blah, blah, blah. And then here are what the statements were, just to kind of orient you to this chart. So decisions are made via integrating all the relevant perspectives quickly. Decisions made are smoothly adopted by those affected. Each team has a process that includes everyone's voice for developing key initiatives. And then this last one says all the teams in the organization have clear recorded scopes of work they are responsible for. So now that I've oriented you, the change is in the green, and you can see that before it was all under 4, and afterward it was all over 4, which I think is pretty significant. Like, that's a pretty significant shift to have people fill out a closing assessment and feel like 4 out of 5, their decisions are integrated quickly and smoothly, and that things are clear. Like, that's actually pretty incredible. So those are some of the biggest improvements, and I think it's really revealing. So to segue, I know that part of this work has also been about living into RG's values more internally. So I'm curious, to what extent has this work helped you to live into RG's anti-oppression values and sharing power, and how?
Yeah, and I see a couple questions about our staff, and actually some specific questions about race and power. So it's a great segue. So we are currently a 20% full-time staff, about half BIPOC identified, half white. We're also about half poor working middle class identified. Actually, maybe slightly, it's like 60% poor working middle class, 40% people who identify as constituents or folks have access to wealth and class privilege. And in terms of like race and power, racial justice in the organization, anti-classism work in the organization, I think it's really important to emphasize that we had ongoing work for years around integrating explicit racial justice lens in our work. From like 2011 through our mission change, where we explicitly named racial justice as part of like a core value and outcome of our work. We've done really focused like organizational change work around racial justice, including increasing the number of people of color reaching in our membership base, changing our own internal practices. We have a standing anti-oppression committee in the organization that has been meeting for years now, 7 years, that the executive director is structurally always expected to be the co-chair of the anti-oppression committee in the organization. We do ongoing staff caucuses around different identities. So we'll do race caucuses, class caucuses, race and class caucuses, and other forms of identity to continue our political education, self-reflection, and accountability work in the organization. So I think this is critical work for any organization to do, and that CoLab didn't bring like an explicit anti-oppression like lens to our work because not because I don't trust that y'all have that analysis, but because we had already embedded it and had a really like strong commitment to doing that work, and that we were understanding how power works in our organization already with an understanding of like white supremacy and racism and classism. And so so I think that's I think what CoLab allowed us to do was just have this like shared set of practices around decision making and governance and power that we could then, if we were noticing that, like with the CoLab structure around integrative consent and like you can raise objections, we have our own framework around if it doesn't align with our anti-oppression values or is causing disproportionate harm to people of color or to poor working class staff or members, raise an objection. Like that's a tool that is being informed by our values and our practices. Yeah.
Yeah, and then just like I was writing down a little bit to see like what our current like count is like around like demographics. But yeah, I think that yeah, like we're definitely like over half like people of color. Yeah, like at the moment, and yeah, I think also predominantly non-constituents, so people from poor working middle class backgrounds. But yeah, like I think in terms of like living into our values, right? Like I think the people who are carrying out decisions are like at the center like of them now, which yeah, like I think as like a former organizer, I think is like just like a huge like yeah, I think like 180 like I think like for like the organization, and this is kind of getting to challenges, but I think like now the bottleneck is like with the organizers, right? Like I think like with the implementers, and I think that like as we're as the folks who are carrying out the decisions, you know, the pace of the organization is more set by them, which I think is where it should be. And yeah, and I think that yeah, I think that this is in my like kind of like closing evaluation, but I think that I don't think that any like governance structure like is going to solve for like living under racial capitalism. I think that the best that we can hope to is to have a system that is equitable, like accessible, like clear, and yeah, and transparent. And I think that CoLab like really has equipped us with those tools. And I think as Ime was saying, it's been like hugely valuable for us, like in addition to like CoLab practice to continue to have, right? Like caucusing and decaucusing like around different identities. And, you know, of course, I hope that we can get to a place where like everybody feels equally comfortable, you know, like sharing their ideas, like equally like comfortable like with conflict or like questioning or like sharing like critical but supportive feedback. And we're also like a constantly changing and evolving like organization, right? We've hired like 5 or 6 new people in the last year. We're going to be hiring 5 or 6 new people this year. And that I think like with, you know, a mentor once told me, like every time you hire a new person, you're a new organization. And so I think like creating, yeah, like I think, so I think for us, yeah, like I think continuing to have caucuses to continue that trust building across difference has been like hugely powerful. And yeah, I think maybe if we were like a collective that was continuing to work together for like many years, we might get to a place where there's like the level of like, yeah, like trust and communication like within our team that we wouldn't need to rely on caucuses. Yeah, I think as much as we have. And sorry, just checking my, yeah, I think that's what I've got.
Thank you. Yeah. And I really appreciated reading through and kind of processing the data that you all, that the RG staff filled out on how this kind of shows up, how the work that they've done and the CoLab work shows up within anti-oppression values, and just felt like Round Sky is in this, evolving alongside you and like continuing to evolve our analyses around race and racial justice and whiteness and how that shows up. So I've really appreciated our partnership with you all in that sense too, that it kind of comes back to relationships. Like it feels like we've really built a relationship in lots of ways, and a relationship isn't just that we're teaching you CoLab, but we're both evolving together as people, and that has felt really valuable to me. And I have not been in the training at all, and I feel like I've gained so much in lots of ways from our own processing. So thank you for that relationship. And I also know that RG has had some challenges over the last year, and even with like alignment and resources to put into this training, and there's a lot that has come up. And so I want to share a little bit about the data and the closing assessment around some of the things that I think speak to those challenges, some of the what are seen as like least improvement or decreases in capacity in some ways. And so I'll share my screen again. So same chart as last time, different statements, different data, but this shows statements with the least improvement. And it's again from March 2020 to May 2021. And so, you can see kind of the headings here: purpose, personal development, interpersonal, and purpose related conversations again. And the blue is from the initial data, and then the red is the change. So people scored this lower than they did last time. So it's not that it was then scored negative, but it's negative 0.17 from what it was, just to orient you. So so in the closing, so a lot of these are related to, two of these are related to purpose, about the values of your organization, feeling like it's clearly articulated and relevant. And then this bottom one, the vision of our organization is compelling to the staff, key partners, and the world at large. And then there's the other two here. The second one is on personal development. In general, staff feel that they are in roles that suit them. And the second one says interpersonal. We have the tools and attitudes to effectively resolve conflict between people in our organization. And to contextualize this, one member filled out in their closing assessment that a recent internal member conflict raises questions about how to more clearly and effectively communicate our vision, mission, and goals to our broader base and partners. And another participant states or reflects back that we haven't reflected on the mission, vision, and values in a long time. Coming back to these would be helpful. It would also be helpful to discuss these in caucus spaces and with all staff to see where folks align and where there's divergence. So I'd love to hear, so we kind of see this data, and I'd love to hear from you about this, and just more generally, what were some of the challenges that you and RG experienced in making progress in this work? And Cecile's also going to comment. Whoever wants to go first, go for it.
Cecile, would you like to share?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. From my perspective, I'm looking more at the sort of process level challenges that I experienced with implementing the work. And some of the key challenges that I saw for RG was initially there was a discomfort or a hesitation to split into smaller teams that had clear boundaries of authority and autonomy to do the work, to get the work done and make decisions about it. Which is understandable, going from a very intimate small team of people for many years, getting to that, oh, we're gonna split into different scopes of work, was an adjustment to make, but RG did that. It just took a little while, and there was also a need ongoingly to sort of align the big picture strategy work, which RG was doing a great job of, with the day-to-day tasks of people delivering on the work, and basically making it a priority internally to integrate a unified task and project management system across the organization, which would provide a little bit of support for that work. And also making time for the work of how do we track this information, the decisions we make, the roles we create. While CoLab provides a really rudimentary mechanism for doing that, RG is a more complex and evolving organization, needs mechanisms for doing that, and also creating more time for practicing the soft skills like interpersonal conflict resolution. I think those are some of the key challenges that I've witnessed over the time together. And, honestly, RG has really navigated a plethora of incredible challenges with the pandemic and Black Lives Matter movement and the recent member letter. And I just, think that the navigation of those challenges has been pretty outstanding overall, but it's definitely added to the complexity of the integration of the work. So yeah, how about you, Ime?
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. I'd say one of my coworkers had a really good analogy where when you're first learning CoLab, it's like you have to, if you're learning the rules of a very complex game. So it's like you're handed this manual, and it's that feeling of like, oh, this would be a lot of fun when everyone understands this and we all know what the rules are and we can play this game. But in the beginning, it's just pretty overwhelming. It can feel very overwhelming. And there's definitely that like a lot of front loading of time and capacity to get to the, like, everyone knows how to facilitate the standard meeting practice and what that is and what integrated consent is. And so I'd say it just takes, yeah. And then once you all know the rules and you can play, it actually does, it's much more integrated and it feels a lot less like cumbersome. But there's really kind of having to, like, you know, like push through that beginning and like keep up the momentum and keep up the commitment to internal organizational change in a time, you know, we were doing this in 2020 when it was, you know, massive external shifts. And so I think that was just a constant juggling of where are we putting our capacity in terms of wanting to be responsive and knowing that this is also an important long-term process. And yeah, I think also just like I think the structure allows us to be more responsive and make decisions and have clear roles. And, you know, we still have to do extra work around, for example, where people have been raising things around increasing our own capacity around conflict resolution, facilitating transformative justice processes. We started conflict resolution scope of work, and just kind of to say that, like, CoLab doesn't solve for everything, that we also have to, as things are changing, as we're navigating different things, we are always in a process of reflecting on what are the additional skills and capacities and that we need, and then how do we integrate that into this existing model is sort of just, it's just like an ongoing challenge for us. So yeah.
Well, yeah, just like before I share my thoughts on the slide that we had, that I'm making a next action for myself to follow up with you, Cecile, because I'm curious to disaggregate the data based on like people who joined after we were already in our CoLab training versus people who were, yeah, through like the whole process. But yeah, like, I think in terms of like some other challenges, you know, I think especially, yeah, I think we had like a backlog of things that like we wanted to talk about and decide on. And so I think that a lot of our meetings have had like fully formed proposals, and then we're just doing like integrative consent like on them, which I think oftentimes is great, like when we're able to do that. And I think that I feel like, especially for me in my work, I'm feeling like the need for like actually having some like more strategy conversations, which, yeah, CoLab definitely like has like the tools to support, but I think just in terms of our own implementation and practice. And then, yeah, I think like an additional challenge, which I think we're going to, yeah, hopefully be solving is, yeah, this like piece like around like member like engagement. So our membership are volunteers. They are the ones who are running our chapters with support from staff. And yeah, we're going to be launching like a national member council. Yeah, it's launched, it's in formation. They're electing like their general circle or their central scope right now. And so, yeah, I think the challenge on the horizon is like integrating member leadership like with the staff leadership, which I feel like we're going to be able to do.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And this year was really intense on so many levels. It was a year of rapid response, and RG definitely like showed up for so much of it. And just, I can imagine like that added so much complexity on top of everything else. And so looking back at what an intense time to do this training together, starting in March, we didn't really know, right? But starting in March, so in the midway through our work with RG in August of 2020, we did an assessment together to kind of evaluate how it was going at that point. And one of the responses was, share my screen again, so you have a visual, was about rapid response. And so this person said that I really believe CoLab helped us immensely with our COVID and uprising rapid response plans, allowing us to clarify roles and responsibilities much more clearly and freeing people up to innovate and really own their roles. In our old structure, it was hard to make any quick pivots. So with that, I'd love to hear a little bit more about to what extent did the tools help you respond together during the last 12 months? And how, if at all, did your collective capacity for responding to challenge shift?
Yeah, I think that quote really sums it up. Of course I don't think anyone would think like, the best time to do a really intensive, deep organizational development project that changes all the ways we do everything is during the pandemic. Like that is not in our plan. And looking back, I'm like, wow, I'm so glad we did it, and we committed to it, because we were actually seeing these practices help us be more responsive in real time, and really distribute power and allow people, especially the organizers, to drive a lot of our response, and to really, like, from their knowledge of what was going on in chapters and what members needed, to design programming, launch virtual, go virtual, launch new virtual programming. And that it really was one of the first times for me where I didn't have to be involved in every single one of those decisions. And as an executive director who was coming from a smaller team that was much more consensus based, and I was one of the bottlenecks. Like, I'll admit that one of the major reasons I wanted to do this was just to actually have more distributed power, so that I wasn't someone who actually did have to. There wasn't any real reason for me as executive director to be involved in those levels of decisions. I really trust the people doing the work to do it, and it was actually kind of amazing to see how this combination of the clarity of where we were with our strategies and then a governance structure that supported us meant that we could drive work very quickly. And yeah, it was a relief to just hear about things in our report backs, and I'll be like, oh, that's great. I think it's amazing that our organizing team is launching that, and not have to actually be slowing it down or involved in that.
Yeah, I would just echo we were able to, I think, quickly convene the relevant decision makers, which I think, right, going to our CoLab roles, we were I think our first rapid response with the pandemic, I think we kind of created an ad hoc scope that brought together all of the relevant decision makers. And then I think learning from that, I mean, last year was the year that we had we launched a rapid response plan in the midst of a rapid response plan. And but I think we eventually were able to identify that our organizing strategy team were the folks who should be driving our rapid response. And so I think now we have a practice of when we're in a rapid response moment, Ime, who doesn't normally sit on that scope as the executive director, does join, but I think it's just really added clarity about who can call for a rapid response moment, who's the lead when we are in a rapid response moment. And I think we're able to just think through all of our roles, okay, what is my role being called to do in this moment, or have responsibility for in this moment. And so I think has added a lot of clarity to, one, how do we decide that this is a rapid response moment, and two, once we decide that we're in one, how do we move? So yeah, that's definitely been hugely helpful.
Thank you. And it's just, thank you for sharing. And also just wanted to add that the RGT did all of this and also put some pieces into place to alleviate pressure on staff, amongst that, which I found just so humanizing in lots of ways. Yes, we need to show up. This is our moment to really even show up even more than usual. And we need to alleviate some of the pressure through hours. And I'm not sure exactly the pieces, but I know that I've heard that was really important. So that there were just so many pieces there that you all thought through. And I know there's a lot here, and I know that people are resonating with some of what you've shared today, especially about what you were struggling with in March at the start of the training, and perhaps what even you're struggling with now, because not a magic wand to make it all better, but just capacity building. And if you didn't see in the chat box, someone did say that it's been really humanizing to hear how even a group with such clear values and a radical vision of another way of being and really impressive, hardy people still struggled with collaborative decision-making so dang much. It speaks to how inordinately tough it is to tackle, and how shared organizational struggles are around it. So if you didn't see that, or if you're on audio, that is that sums up what I wanted to share here. And so we're almost at our time, but I'd love to kind of wrap up the interview questions with, if you were to take one piece of advice to offer based on what you've learned through this to the folks here, what would it be?
I'd say do your work around power and how it's connected to our existing oppressive systems of like racism, classism, sexism, et cetera, like to really have shared understanding and analysis about that as a full team, or an ongoing practice around this before implementing CoLab or alongside of implementing CoLab. I just think it's really critical to to approach this with like a holistic understanding of systems of oppression and power as you're taking on a participatory like governance structure. And the other thing is like I think someone on the senior leadership team needs to take CoLab level 1 certification and just really feel very comfortable and versed in all of the tools and practices.
Yeah, I think that we've already touched on this, but I think it was like hugely powerful that there was like buy-in from like from senior leadership, right? And that it wasn't just Ime as the executive director coming in and being like, I want us to do this. I think this will solve our problems, but that there was this like unified front of like, we're going to try this out. And I think the fact that we had like 3 people do the certification and then like lead our largest teams in starting to develop the practice. And yeah, I wouldn't, there wasn't like any like objections or like hard resistance to CoLab, but I think that there definitely was like soft resistance to like these, at first the meetings are longer, like as you're getting used to the practice, and yeah, like what's the rules, like am I using the right highlighter color on this document? And so yeah, so I think like sticking with it probably for like at least 3 months of like fully having like your scopes and your organizational structure and like using the standard meeting practice, and then I think by that point it felt like the benefits were really starting to show up like for us.
Yeah, nice. I really resonate with everything Ime and Yaya just said. And I would add to that I think it was really wise to have a consent of the whole organization at the beginning to give this a try. It was an experiment, it was framed as an experiment. We're going to check in on this at 6 months and then again at a year and so on. I think that allowed people to navigate their discomfort around change with more ease. And the other thing I just recommend is, Ime pointed to this, have at least one role, possibly a team, whose job it is to develop and maintain the centralized leadership, decentralized leadership practices in the organization ongoingly. So it's not, doesn't just become a one-off thing we're going to do, but it becomes a living conversation in the organization with someone or a team holding the centrality of the importance of this and providing a place where changes can go back to shift the set of practices to meet your needs. So, yeah.
Nice. Thank you so much to all 3 of you and Daniel for kind of teching us through this. And so with that, I wanted to some people have been asking in the chat box about some of Round Sky's tools. So I just want to point you in the right direction real quick. And then RG has some things coming up as well. And then we're going to get to some of your questions just to give you a sense of the flow here. So, okay, so I'm sharing my screen. So for those of you who are curious about working with us on setting up collaborative leadership structures and processes for decision-making, meetings, roles, and collaboration in general, you can fill out, there's a form on this page, roundskysolutions.com/trainings, and then that starts the conversation. You can tell us a bit about what's going on with your organization. And then in the fall, we also have our level 1 course. So if you're interested in taking the course as an individual or a couple people on your team instead of a customized training, that's an option too. But you have choices. And I will pass it to someone from RG who wants to share a little bit more about what's coming up?
Yeah, you want to do our call to action? All right.
I can do my call to action. Like first and foremost, we are a membership organization. Our target constituency, right, is young people with access to wealth, 18 to 35. But we do have like membership categories for people with access to wealth over 35, or what we call advocate members who are poor, working, and middle class. Encourage everybody, if you support our work, to join us or recommend Resource Generation to somebody you know who might benefit from our organizing. If you just want to stay in the loop, you can fill out our intake form, and that'll get you on our listserv. Our upcoming programs, we have like a virtual conference coming up, Transforming Philanthropy. That's for young people with access to wealth who are connected to family foundations or family giving vehicles, or are personally high net wealth, meaning that they have access to over $1 million personally, or access to over $10 million in their family. And then we have an upcoming, on June 21st, we have an RG 101 for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. If you know any BIPOC people who might be interested in RG, that would be a really great first landing spot.
Nice, and I think I put most of those links in the chat box that you just mentioned. Definitely add it in if I missed one. And so with that, I'd love to get to the Q&A. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can see each other's faces still. And okay, so we have some questions from earlier. I just want to let you know we might not get to all of them, but I'm scrolling. There is a question here about hierarchy, and do you think hierarchy is inherently something to take down, or is it okay to have it if it is explicit and transparent and people have the ability to be a part of decisions that directly impact them? This person says that I'm a part of a staff collective that is trying to figure out how to have staff members who are not collective members.
Yeah, I think one thing to know is that we still have a hierarchy, like in our organization. So we've decentralized a lot of leadership, but there's still managers who have power around performance evaluation, hiring and firing. There's still different titles in an organization, and there's also different salary levels. And we do have a transparent salary and compensation policy, and everybody knows how their salary is calculated, but there are differentials based on responsibilities. And I think what CoLab has really helped us with is around being really explicit and transparent about people's responsibilities and then which decisions they're a part of. It has really structured it so that people who are most impacted by decisions are making those decisions. It also has restructured, so what used to be called our strategy team is now our executive team, which includes representatives from each of the key scopes of work. So it's actually a cross-team body that includes our operations team, our organizing team, our comms team, that they are actually now and people rotate into those roles that are making decisions about RG overall. So like organizational wide policy decisions are now being held across representatives from all key parts of the work. And so I think that's one way that has really helped. And you don't have to have a director title to be part of this executive team. So it's also a really great leadership development model where people can serve terms on that team. And it's just a process of elections and nominations, but it's not based on like fixed positions.
Anything anyone else wants to add to that? Okay, great. Thanks for sharing. And I really like what Cecile has said in the past, that the goal of CoLab is to take the best parts of hierarchy, which are like clear roles, clarity, like people know what they're supposed to do, and the best parts of collaboration, which is innovation, like the humanizing pieces, and put them into one. And that is kind of what I was hearing a little bit underline what you were saying in some ways, that connects well. There are some other questions here about that I don't think was covered about racial demographics. You started talking about that, your staff racial demographics. There's also a question around, did you disaggregate survey results by race? Which I don't think that we did. I'm pretty sure we did not, but that could be an option. In terms of like with the data, you could ask the RG team if they would like that information. So I thought that could be useful to lift up. And then how did racialized power show up in this transition?
It's an interesting question. I think it helped that the senior leaders, so Caitlin, Faisal, and I, so I'm a person of color, Faisal identifies as a person of color, and there's a white leader, that it was a multiracial team that was doing level 1 training. I think that was important. It was also a cross-class team in our organization. I think that asking the full team for consent beforehand helped mitigate power dynamics. I think there's probably still, I'm sure there's implicit dynamics around white people in our organization who feel maybe more like empowered to bring proposals, to nominate themselves for roles, or I think that's probably still like I think the ways that just sort of shows up in terms of privileged patterns of identity, but I don't know, I'm kind of curious, Yaya, have you any thoughts on if you saw other ways that you saw like whiteness or privilege dynamics?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, yeah, I would be curious to disaggregate the survey results. By race. I think that's like a really great question. And yeah, I mean, I think we spoke to like our use of caucusing. And so yeah, like I don't think that I mean, I think it's been like, I think just like in terms of moving like our whole team forward, I think it was powerful for us to have like a race and class diverse, like I think senior leadership team. And so I think like in another organization where, like if the senior leadership is like all like white upper middle class people, like and that's not representative of like the whole organization, then maybe it could feel like a certain way in terms of like its implementation. But yeah, and then I think in terms of like, we're continuing to work on, I think, wanting to support like people as individuals to like feel as empowered as possible in terms of like voicing their opinions in service of the work.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question, and I think this might be a good one to close us on possibly. So this person says, I'm curious if as a nonprofit organization, your approach to governance has changed in terms of what's a board decision versus what's a staff decision from your organizational transformation using CoLab. And how are you feeling about that sort of nonprofit industrial complex tension between board and staff power?
Great question. As part of this, we have actually trained our board on CoLab, and they have also consented to use CoLab. And we've actually restructured some of the board committees. We now have a new board exec committee that's also representative of all existing board committees. We're using integrative consent instead of more like the Roberts rules, like standard way of board decision making. I think the board similarly had a lot of values around collaboration and just really appreciates the structured share meeting practice and the clarity of CoLab. And I still have a major role as an executive director to be reporting to them, be keeping them in the loop. They still have all the governance roles as a C3 board, but it's been really helpful to align these leadership bodies with the shared like practices of CoLab. And like Yaya mentioned, our new National Member Council will also be trained in CoLab, so then we will have a unified structure. And I think it does actually mitigate some of the power dynamics between board and staff, because then there's a lot more clarity about what is a board decision, what's a joint board staff decision, and how are staff represented in board decisions that impact them. Like all those things are actually pretty well addressed through CoLab. I would say it's harder because the board doesn't meet as often for them to adopt CoLab. Like one thing that really works is just doing this in a day-to-day way. It makes the learning a lot faster. So we'll still need to continue to like make sure that the board is trained and that there's consistent like capacity there.
Nice. And I imagine that not just for nonprofits, but also worker co-ops often have boards, so that, and consumer co-ops. So if there are other co-op people in here, that clarity can be super helpful to every board acts differently in my experience about what they think their power is and what their realm is. So I think it's super useful to have clarity on what is going to work for that organization. So maybe we'll just do a quick close about anything you want to say before we jump off, and put it in the chat box. Anything you want to say before you jump off, appreciations or lingering questions, words, whatever. And the 5 of us will also share 3 words. So just super appreciative of this time together, and I'll pass it to Ime to close.
Yeah, so just thanks a lot for your time and interest, and yeah, really encourage, yeah, you know, if you're thinking about this, like CoLab's work for us, also explore other models. But I think like my last thing is just like, if the commitment we made to this has actually been transformative for our organization. It's a lot of work and it does pay off. And so I think just want to share that as a reflection, and it's just going to be ongoing, and we'll still be growing and learning as in the coming years.
Thanks. How about you, Yaya?
Yeah, super grateful, I think, like, for being able to like share this experience. And yeah, and I think I definitely encourage like any organization or people that are yeah, like curious about this to yeah, like reach out to Round Sky, or if you have any follow-up questions about RG, yeah, to reach out to us. And yeah, I think I just yeah, really want as many organizations as possible, I think, to be yeah, like starting to practice democracy, and to be practicing, I think, collaboration like in this way. And that yeah, I think that like our movement's going to continue to learn and iterate and adapt, and I think as many sites as we have experimenting as possible, the better.
Nice. How about from you, Daniel?
Yeah, it was super wonderful just to hear the whole summary all at once from you all. You know, I've been a part of it, but kind of like a little you know, cog in the works in various ways. You know, I was one of the ones crunching numbers on the surveys in the background and stuff. So it's really great to kind of see the broad scopes, and really appreciating all of you who showed up as curious people, and obviously engaged in your own way with improving our world. So thank you for being here.
Thanks. And you, Cecile? Close us out.
Yeah, well, I'm just so grateful that so many of you are interested in what it takes to share power. And I just want to just deeply appreciate that. Our world doesn't really know how to do that. And this is risky and challenging and scary and hard, and yet it's so worth it. And so I just really want to thank you all for your interest in this arena, and encourage you to go forth and spread the word, make it happen.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Feel free to open your mics and say goodbye. Thank you for being here. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.